Hello, I'm Mandy-Suzanne, a writer in Bermuda. Thank you all so much for listening, and many thanks to the conference organizers for inviting me. I'm here with the interdisciplinary artist and activist Catherine Eddy. Our third panelist, Tracy McDonald, who was to talk about sculpture and photography, is unfortunately unable to join us. The title of our panel is Art, Animals, Empathy. We'll be discussing how multimedia artworks, especially involving sound, challenge the perspectives from which humans typically relate to other animals. The title of my talk is Artificial Wilderness, Empathy in Field Recording. It was published this year as a nonfiction chapbook by Selkirk Station Press in London, illustrated by Catherine Eddy. It is her wonderful paintings and drawings that will illuminate my talk today. She will then talk with you about her mind-blowing multimedia installations. So let's begin with Artificial Wilderness, Empathy in Field Recording. There are more ways to listen than there are listeners. Nobody listens the same way all the time, but however you choose to listen must take time and attention. Otherwise, you're not listening. We often hear things without listening. The air conditioner, the conversation at the next table, the person trying to get through to you while you drown out what they're saying with your preconceptions. The frogs. Every night, the frogs. I know they're there. I hear them every night. But how often do I listen? I mean, really pay attention. I've been investigating the work of radical sound artists who listen closely to non-human animals and record their voices. I've noticed that the more I listen to recordings of non-human sounds, the more attentively I listen to the frogs around the house at night, the kiskadees and feral roosters and the sough of leaves in daytime. Listening to recordings of African toads, Norwegian shrimps, Japanese bugs makes me want to be a better listener to Bermudian non-humans. It takes work. Really listening is an effort. Really listening means being quiet and not tuning out, disattending from your own hang-ups to attend to the sound you're hearing. That sound might just mean somebody right beside you needs your help. This is why sound artist Kathy Lane records impoverished stevedores in India, humans to whom other humans rarely listen. As she said on Robbie Judkin's indispensable radio program Animal Sounds, listening, I mean really listening, is the ultimate activist act. Taking the time to pay attention is the first step in acknowledging that somebody might need you. It takes effort to let someone else's plight interrupt your private telenovela. Lane hopes listening to art will encourage us to want to make that effort, the effort to want to be interrupted. It's not easy. Still, I'll join Lane in that wager. I'll wager that listening to sounds we wouldn't normally pay attention to and listening to them in art, a painstaking, emotional, risky practice, can help us learn to hear what we don't want to hear in loads of different ways, ways that could make those wild, unwanted sounds get under our skin. Sound artist Dave Phillips wagers the same. I learned a lot about interruptions from his 2016 South Africa recordings. 2 CDs, 36 tracks, 157 minutes of raw field recordings, which he made in South African wildlife reserves. This album can be overwhelming. It's chock full of life tripping over itself, even in the titles. Track 1 is called Night Soundscapes at Harris Weir with Bubbling Casinas, Riparian Woodland on the Limpopo River single recording. There are several ways to listen to this album. The album disrupts all of them. One way is to start at the beginning. Dave says each disc is one continuous listening session, and he's provided photos to complement the soundscapes. So as I listen, I look. Each photo bears the numbers of the relevant tracks, inviting me to weave connections between images and sounds. Listening to the track called Night Soundscapes at Harris, I linger with my gaze on black trees reaching out to the rosy gold Limpopo. Cicadas whistling forms a texture like the dusty clouds in the burnt orange sky. Until I see Dave wrote, play loud. With the volume up, I can hear things besides cicadas. I hear claps of various pitches, a rhythmic bumps and cracks, eventually a weird, sharp something like a knife, scraping a log. Or is it a dog? Could it be? Silence. The track is over. Track 2 has no fade in. A fresh blast of cicada screeching feels like landing on a bed of needles. The whole album feels like this. Dave asks us to listen continuously, all the way through without stopping. There's no way we can do this quickly. This 2.5-hour artwork requires us to listen slowly and at length, and yet each track is interrupted. There's no settling in. Before I've even had time to find the photo of one of my favorite moments, a track called Night Warthog single recording, 7 seconds, And he's gone. And that's wildlife. It gets in the way and makes a mess where we don't want it. It's a rustle in the bushes and then gone. Wildlife warrants lingering attention, but wildlife never lingers. The undomesticated disrupt and disappear, but in doing so, they make claims on us. Listening approaches activism when we listen for those claims in others' interruptions. Art can conspire to make that happen. If a soundscape is whatever it's possible to hear at a particular time and place, I conspire with Dave Phillips to interrupt my home soundscape, shattering it when I crank the volume, so whether I like it or not, I now have a haunting relationship with sandfrogs, weederdopers, casinas, cicadas of the Limpopo, conspiring with amphibians and insects to break into a civilized soundscape, seize everyone's attention, make us listen to Africa. Chris De Laurenti, a sound artist who records Western cityscapes, once described field recording as oral safari. That term makes me cringe a little. It's got too much history with massacring elephants. Decapitation is a style of interior decorating. Machismo a la Hemingway. Generally speaking, Westerners blowing into Africa and shooting trophies. But for De Laurenti, oral safari seems to be less about trophies and more about awe and the promise of adventure. Quitting the recording studio to listen to an unstable, perhaps dangerous outside, hazarding mutiny from one's machines and daring what De Laurenti calls audibly risky tactics. Oral safari suggests a listening life that's never free of uncertainty. It intimates the leonine unruliness of sounds. Sounds come from outside to pounce on us and touch so we feel it in our bones and our hairs rise. South Africa recordings are very much about uncertainty, definitely unruliness. But trophies, adventure, no. Dave does take audible risks, including hippos and hyenas, but if the drama of majestic predators were all he was after, he wouldn't have left long stretches of bug noise in the track entitled Jackals and Lions After Midnight. He does record the animals without their permission, as did De Laurenti when he recorded humans on the Metro Transit A line. Though recording without permission can be tyrannical, as in surveillance states, it can also be subversive, undermining the powers that be, as in Egyptian citizen journalism. There are different ways of listening in, not all of them exploitative. Exploitative listening is listening in hope of gaining some unfair advantage over whomever you're listening to. Dave sticking a microphone in a hyena's den for 38 seconds is not exploitative. He's hoping to help hyenas to tell humans that hyenas love their families, that hyenas express their love in idiosyncratic voices, that hyenas deserve consideration as living beings. Still, as fun as it might be to hear a hyena, this is another sound we generally prefer not to actually listen to. Listening to it, not just hearing it, means thinking about it. Thinking about hyenas could mean acknowledging yet another animal with claims on our planet, which would mean it isn't our planet, and humans' egocentric sense of entitlement is delusional. This is what Dave's trying to get to by listening in. Some disruption, however brief, of anthropocentric tyranny. The artist's intention isn't everything, but it does count for something. His refusal to edit the bugs out of the lions says a lot about how he listens. It's not about Attenborough-worthy clarity. Dave listens for entangled individuals interrupting each other. He also just loves bugs. The track called Earfly's Solo is exactly what it sounds like. Dave recorded this solo with in-ear microphones, which are exactly what they sound like. The fly sounds close enough to itch, and it was. I don't know how he could stand it, but Dave encouraged that fly to enter his body through his head. There's also a track called Fly's Duet with Cicada in Searing Neon Heat, edited so the fly's skin-crawling buzzing as if impaled by a cicada's serrated shriek. There's almost no layering anywhere else on the album. Dave arranged this duet to sound out the dissonance of the wild, its smashing too-closeness. As one reviewer put it, buzzing, whizzing, and fizzing, Dave's recording project provides a window into a South Africa that has too often been overshadowed by political and societal clashes. When wildlife conservationists throw all their energy behind charismatic animals and overlook the small, the ugly, the dirty, and the pesky, conservation is doomed to fail. It fails in another way when conservationists insist on Western or scientific perspectives and ignore others. just as history fails when all it gives us are the blustering of privileged men, swaggering heroes of the majority population in empty frames called nations, throwing their weight around, disparaging those who don't march to the big brass band, and ignoring non-humanity altogether. Face to face with bugs, many humans scare themselves silly. I'm one of them. Bugs look like aliens. They get in the way. They mooch off our property and eat our flesh with no regard for hygiene. We hate them because just by being here, bugs show us our vulnerability and our afterlife. Clarice Lispector wrote, "Listen, faced with the living cockroach, the worst discovery was that the world is not human and that we are not human." But my feeble perspective isn't the only one. In Japanese culture, appreciating the sounds of insects is a tradition that goes back to olden times. Their sounds employed as songs, a voice or a message from another creature, wrote the sound artist Hiroki Sasajima. He means an insect sound is someone's voice, not just noise. A bug isn't a mechanism of the hive, but a distinctive someone with his or her own personality and goings-on. This is what Sasajima's 2012 album of insect voices, Colony, is all about. Since he keeps one or two individuals consistently in the foreground of his crystal clear recordings, they really do feel like person-to-person contact. Which is ironic because Sasajima didn't interview his bugs up close and cozy like Dave did. Sometimes Sasajima would set up his recording gear someplace, Mount Fiji or a forest, and then just leave. Leave non-humans to listen for non-humans. "I don't want there to be any trace of myself as a physical sound on the recordings," he told an interviewer. Not because he suffers any illusions about pristine wilderness, but because I don't care very much either way about the sound of human beings. What I'm interested in is delicate sound, particularly sound with less information content. He means less information content for humans, because if a thing means nothing to us, neither food nor nuisance, it's easier for it to elude our clutches. Listening to bugs because of what they mean in Japanese cultures and because what they say means nothing to humans, sure, it's a contradiction. A contradiction that boils down to caring about bugs living with us as bugs. In Africa, bug lovers love differently. Dave made some of his recordings in a wildlife reserve which South Africa shares with Botswana. I once read a novel about flying termites inundating Botswana after a heavy rain. The human protagonists run with joy to meet them, pluck them from the sky, pop them in their mouths, feeling like children reborn. Now, it's true I've gone and done what Dave asked me not to do. In trying to listen for interruptions and ideological disruptions, listen for new perspectives and opportunities to be quiet for a while, in my enthusiasm I've listened like a tourist. I've treated South Africa recordings like a sound map. A sound map is a web-based map with digital pins that play recordings from the pinned locations when you click them, like naturesoundmap.com, where you can click Japan and hear Sasajima's recording of frogs, pan across to the Ahors, and click for Ed Druitt Shearwaters with a hop, skip, and a click, listen in on Ugandan hippos courtesy of Colin Hunter. Instant gratification for the fleetingly curious. It's hard not to turn South Africa recordings into a sound map when you listen through a computer. You scroll, you see the word hippopotami in a track title, you get excited because really, how often do you get to hear hippopotami? And you click and forget the bugs. But even on a computer, the album itself gets in the way of click and skimming actually being fun. As Dave says, the quality of attention defines the quality of experience. Sifting for elephants in his Forest of Wordy captions shows how little there is to see and how much there is to miss if you're just sightseeing for wildlife's stereotypical poster faces. And you won't find elephants. It's not that Dave ignores big animals. They're tangled up in South Africa too, but his recordings of big animals are rarely longer than a minute or two. Hippos and hyenas get 30 seconds each. The rest of the time, it's bugs, rodents, frogs, and toads. This could just be prudence. Hippos, for instance, run faster than Dave and have been known to give chase when disturbed. But it's also part of the point. Dave's way of saying South African wildlife is in your face, but disappearing. African lions were declared endangered in 2015, so the rarity of something like Dave's recording entitled Jackals and Lions After Midnight is significant. In contrast to the ubiquitous chittering frogs and bugs, these lions bellow with all the deep, hair-raising drama that has amazed and terrified bipedal primates through the ages. for about 3 minutes before vanishing. But Dave isn't out to build a sound arc of vanishing species. It's not about species for him, it's about individuals, particular animals with particular ambitions of their very own. It's also about entanglements, individuals needing each other, bugging each other, interrupting each other. Dave gives us micro stories like 2 wandering hyenas meet family at their den, and hundreds of doves at a waterhole shortly after sunrise. A jackal attempts catching some unsuccessfully. This poor jackal gets in one growl before a noise like a propeller plane drowns out everything, a million billion wings pumping with all their might. But as the swarm takes flight, Dave clips the track. The abrupt unfinishing makes me feel the jackal's dissatisfaction, his frustration at being tangled up with all these birds, unable to possess a single one of them. South Africa recordings sounds out abundant entanglements between individuals coexisting contentiously and peacefully. And not just animals either, buffalo and waterhole, jackal and monkey at that very waterhole, birds and bugs in a thunderstorm. The hippos need the birds who need the bugs. Immersion, being part of something, Dave writes. And if you listen closely, you can hear Dave between us and the non-humans, the field recordist in the role of a mediator, as he puts it. He does not hide his interventions. He lists them in titles like Barking Geckos, 4 recordings layered. Nor does he hide the artificialness of our intimacy with the animals. Artificial meaning made by skill, not feigned. Those sharp cuts between tracks, half moments of breath-stopping silence, these are glimpses of a void, a lack that's essential to these recordings. The lions are not here. The mediator severed their voices from their bodies and sent them to my computer. And of course they're here, right here. The voices roaring through my headphones are those lions' voices, no one else's. Dave, as mediator, isn't the orchestrator of this border-busting intimacy without intimacy. He's part of it, immersed in it. Among the lions, he is judiciously quiet, but if you turn it up, you'll hear his cautious footsteps around the hippos. When the wind blows between hyenas, an unmistakable popping alerts us to the presence of a handheld microphone. What we don't hear is Dave's voice. We never hear his story. So his presence is ambiguous and opening, full of questions. Questions passing through him to ourselves. The bygone presences of lions and recordist conspire with my memories, barging in on them so I can't help but wonder about myself in relation to animals like them. Being struck by a strange cry implodes time and space, entangling my body, my history, with the cry itself, the entity who cries, and the mediators between us. And this raises more questions about where things belong, what belonging means, how vast is anyone's home range. You can listen with these sorts of questions in mind. You can listen out for absent reference, listen for challenges to ruling ideologies, encourage critical questions to interrupt your listening, disrupt your reading, get in the way of safari-style touristic hearing. You can let different kinds of listening interrupt each other. Instead of skipping to the fruit bats, wherever you are in the album, just let it play to the end. Or, instead of bringing questions, listen out for them. Or just listen. Just pay attention to the sound. That stranger, that strange thing living in some other place and suddenly here, right here. How about just listening in silent amazement? Maybe this is why Dave recommends long listening sessions, so we have time to shut up, let in the sounds, and wonder. Silent listening tells me the frog exists, alive here and now and still. Listening makes me look, take notice. I'm amazed by a frog's bright voice. I luxuriate in the fact that frogs coincide with me in ordinary living. The act of listening is self-perpetuating, interrupted by itself as new moments of not just human living barge in, demanding to be heard. This is an opportunity, a chance for something outside of me to interrupt my ambling through life, seize my attention for itself, just for itself, a branch, a fly, some unwanted human being, and grasp me there, extend the moment, and ask me in its own way what it has to ask of me, clasping me to our moment of coincidence, and maybe I start to understand and ask myself, do I understand? An interruption comes from outside, barging in on you, requiring something of you. It's an event or a sudden absence. Listening is acknowledging interruptions at length, maybe waiting for them, even inviting them to disrupt your routine with their demands. And maybe all they demand at least at first, is acknowledgement. Thank you again for listening.